Mark Holland, weeknights on WSAW News Channel 7.
Live from the WSAW studio in Wausau, the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association Foundation presents the 2018 U.S. Senate debate with incumbent Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin and Republican challenger Leah Vukmir. Now, here's WBA Foundation President and CEO Michelle Vetterkind.
Good evening. The Wisconsin Broadcasters Association and its member radio and television stations are pleased to welcome you to this U.S. Senate debate between the race's two leading candidates, U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin and State Senator Leah Vukmir. Tonight's event originates from Wausau, Wisconsin, at the studios of WSAW-TV in beautiful downtown Wausau. Tonight's debate continues the WBA's long-standing commitment to excellence and public service. The debate is underwritten by the WBA Foundation and supported by a grant from the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. Let's go now to our moderator, a veteran Wisconsin broadcaster, member of the WBA Hall of Fame, and professor of leadership and media integrity at Loyola University, Chicago, Jill Geisler.
Good evening. High-quality debates serve democracy by helping voters see clear distinctions between candidates. They aren't a game show. They focus on specifics, not generalities, policies, not personalities, and they demand that candidates back up their positions and promises with facts that stand the test of scrutiny. That's our goal tonight, and to that end, we've set specific rules for the candidates to which they have agreed. The order of candidates has been determined by coin toss. We don't play favorites, but we do expect them to keep to time. For the majority of the hour, that means 90-second answers to panelist questions. Now, our candidates can see a big countdown clock, and so do I. If they reach their 90-second limit and continue, I ask them to stop. If they go on, I will so note, and their microphone will cease to function, and we move on. Candidates have been known to avoid giving specific answers or to change the subject. If that happens, we have agreed that the moderator will invoke the option to call them out on it and to give them just 30 seconds to answer the question as asked. Our candidates have agreed not to use props, and we won't either. Toward the latter quarter of the hour, we will ask a few quick questions of each candidate, for which they each have 30 seconds to respond, and unless they directly attack their opponent, there is no rebuttal. We close with 2-minute statements from each candidate. Now, let's get started by welcoming them with the titles they've asked us to use, Senator Tammy Baldwin and Ms. Leah Vukmir, and now we'll start the questioning. And we start with Ben Meyer of WJFW-TV in Rhinelander. Ben?
Thank you, Jill. Good evening. Ms. Vukmir, on Wednesday, you sent out this tweet. Quote, must read, in a new op-ed today, @Real Donald Trump says Baldwin Care will demolish our promises to our seniors, unquote. You linked to an op-ed by President Trump that attacked Medicare for All, which you're calling Baldwin Care because Senator Baldwin is a co-sponsor of the proposal. In that USA Today op-ed, the president said Medicare for All would, quote, eviscerate Medicare, unquote. But multiple nonpartisan fact-checkers debunked that and other of the president's claims. In fact, the Washington Post fact-check went so far as to say, quote, almost every sentence contained a misleading statement or a falsehood, unquote. For example, seniors won't lose their benefits, they'll get more. Ms. Vukmir, do you stand behind the president's op-ed?
I stand behind the fact that the plan that Senator Baldwin is supporting, and I have called it Baldwin Care, which is a complete government takeover of health care. She wants to turn the entire shebang over to government, will, if you read the bill, and I have, it will dismantle Medicare, Medicaid, the TRICARE program that our veterans use. It will also dismantle the Affordable Care Act, and I agree with that. We should dismantle that. But it also gets rid of private insurance. And I think that Tammy Baldwin is okay with that. I'm not. This is a scary scenario to me as a nurse who has given quality care to patients throughout my entire career. And Tammy Baldwin wants to put everyone on a system where doctors will be reimbursed at a much lower rate That means far few doctors are going to participate. Many will retire. Fewer will want to enter into the field of medicine. So we'll have fewer doctors, more patients. That means the quality of care is going to go down. I've worked too hard to give quality care to the patients in my career, and I'm not going to let that happen to our seniors or to anyone in the state of Wisconsin or in our country.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin, response?
Yes. Well, first of all, I read that fact check, and I agree with the premise of your question that almost every line was not true. But I want to say that Leah Vukmir talks a lot about her time as a nurse, but I really want to focus on her voting record as a 16-year politician. And no wonder she's worried about private insurance. At every vote on health issues, she seems to have sided more with the private insurers than she has with patients. Whether that's her vote to deny insurance coverage for oral chemo, or her vote to deny deaf children cochlear implants or hearing aids, or her vote to prevent insurance companies from expanding mental health coverage. On and on and on. It's like she cares more about making sure that costs are low for insurance companies than for Wisconsin patients. This is really a question and a choice for the voters. Are we going to go backwards, as Leah would have us do, or are we going to go forwards? There's critical issues facing us right now in the United States Congress. The costs are too high, and we have bipartisan plans to lower them. I believe we should have Medicare negotiate for lower prescription drug prices. I think we should pass my bipartisan Fair Drug Pricing Act. But we need to move forward to the eventual goal that all
Senator
of us have
Baldwin,
affordable health care.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Chris Conley.
Senator Baldwin, your proposal to block low-cost, low-coverage health insurance failed by just one vote in the Senate. Why should an otherwise healthy young person not be allowed to buy that type of health insurance? And what should happen if a person finds out that certain things are then not covered, like their prescription drugs or mental health care or addiction health services?
You know, many people refer to these insurance plans as junk insurance. They're often not worth the paper that they're written on. These plans do not have to cover pre-existing conditions. They do not have to cover emergency room care. They do not have to cover prescription drug coverage. They don't even have to cover maternity care, and most of them don't. Now, my opponent, Leah Vukmir, supports these plans. But I fear we'll go back to the old days when these plans used to exist, and people either who, as you say, were healthy would enroll and find out at their time of need that they're not covered, and then end up in bankruptcy court. We don't want to go back to those bad old days. We want to move forward and make sure that we keep the guarantees in the Affordable Care Act that said you cannot discriminate against someone because they had a pre-existing health condition. And we have to keep the Affordable Care Act in order to do that, along with its other protections. But having these plans that used to exist, but were shrunk to only 3 months, because what we found is that prices went up in the insurance market because sicker and older people remained there. They needed the comprehensive coverage. And a lot of folks who thought they'd be healthy got stuck with bankruptcy or bills when they enrolled in health insurance that didn't cover them.
Ms. Vukmir, your response.
I first want to respond to something that Senator Baldwin just previously said. And, you know, she wishes to cherry pick various votes that I've taken. And I have a strong track record of supporting mental health. Just this last session, 8 bills on mental health issues. And so it's easy for her to grab a quick headline by saying things like that, but there are a lot of unintended consequences that happen from pieces of legislation, and I keep that in mind when I look at things. But let's talk about Senator Baldwin's proposal and the fact that she you know, they are, I think that what you're proposing are restrictive. And we want people to have more choices. Imagine, Senator Baldwin, if you had a son or daughter and they wanted to get off your insurance, and they're healthy, and they want to stand on their own and make it on their own. And they can't do that under the proposal that you have. They don't want to bankrupt their parents if they have one major catastrophic accident. They can't afford right now the Affordable Care Act. And so this is an option for them to have a healthy coverage for themselves that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. You want everybody to have the same thing, but people have different needs. We need to create a market in healthcare where people have the type of insurance that works for them. That would create the competition that would be necessary for prices to be lowered and the quality of care to go up. Senator Baldwin, you don't want that. You want a one-size-fits-all program.
Your time is up. Let's move on to Melissa Langman.
No response?
No response. Next question.
Okay.
We're going to stay with healthcare right now, but we are going to turn the topic to pre-existing medical conditions. Ms. Vukmir, you said in the first debate that was held, quote, "I would fall in front of a truck before I would let people go without coverage for pre-existing conditions." You do want to repeal the Affordable Care Act and return to those high-risk pools available before ACA went into effect. Now, the Kaiser Family Foundation says those costly high-risk pools worked for about 25,000 Wisconsinites who could afford insurance, and it is estimated that about 852,000 people in the state have pre-existing conditions. If ACA went away tomorrow, how would they get coverage and how would it be funded?
Well, this is the lie that's being perpetuated all across the country against every Republican candidate. The left has glommed onto this as their issue. The fact of the matter is that before Obamacare went into place, federal law said that if you're on Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance, you were covered for pre-existing conditions. I said it before, and I will say it again. I will fall in front of a truck before I let people with pre-existing conditions go without coverage. We know how to take care of people with pre-existing conditions. It can be done. The fact of the matter is what Senator Baldwin is proposing, her plan, is going to make it almost impossible for people to receive the care that they want. Imagine if you don't have private insurance and you're that person who has a rare lung disease. You're not able to see your special doctor. That's what Senator Baldwin wants us to do, to be on a plan where you put somebody at risk like that. Or let's say you need a hip replacement or you want a knee replacement. That's considered elective surgery. We have seen this happen in Canada and England. People wait 12 hours in an emergency room. They wait 2 months from onset of diagnosis of cancer, breast cancer. Imagine 2 months before treatment. This is a system that Senator Baldwin would put us in. I don't want that. That is not good quality health care. That is not what we are used to giving to people in our healthcare system now, and I refuse to let that happen.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you're focusing in on pre-existing conditions. It's actually the issue that brought me into public life to begin with. When I was a child, I was very sick, in the hospital 3 months, and afterwards, my grandparents had a real struggle finding me insurance because I was labeled as that child with a pre-existing condition. And it has been my life's work to fight to make sure that Americans have access to affordable quality health care, regardless of pre-existing condition or other factors, that we don't have an age tax for people over 50. All of these things and many more were incorporated when we finally passed the Affordable Care Act. And my opponent would have voted against it. In fact, the vote to defeat it went down by 1 vote. And she has said that she would be the deciding vote if she were elected to the United States Senate. And I really think this goes down to the choice of, are we going to go forward or are we going to go backwards? You talked about the HRSP program. It's very expensive, a 6-month wait if you had pre-existing conditions. And there were still lifetime caps. And only about 1% of Wisconsinites with pre-existing conditions ever enrolled. Same as a problem with the junk plans. About 1 in 5 people is rejected when they apply for that insurance. And how can you have a choice of doctors if your
Senator
insurance
Baldwin,
won't even cover the procedure?
Time is up. Thank you. Next question goes to Jeff Talon of SAW-TV.
Thank you, Jill. Good evening, ladies. I asked followers on my work Facebook page what topics they'd like to see covered tonight. To my surprise, more requested marijuana legalization than any other subject. So here's the question. More than a dozen Wisconsin counties, including the one you're in right now, Marathon, have marijuana legalization-related referendum questions on the November 6th ballot. An August Marquette University Law School poll asked Wisconsin residents where we stood on the issue. It found 61% of registered voters favor full legalization with regulations akin to those on alcohol. At the federal level, would you support at least changing marijuana from a Schedule I drug, a highly addictive drug with no medical value, to a Schedule II drug, addictive but having some medical value, therefore opening it up to at least researching marijuana for medical use? And I believe this is for Ms. Vukmir.
Actually, Senator Baldwin starts on
Pardon
this
me.
one, and then Ms. Vukmir responds.
Well, I appreciate that question. And this issue actually does come up more than most people would realize at the federal level. But let me start with where I would be on those referenda. I haven't seen all of them, but I believe that I would be, I think there is one on my ballot at home, and I will be supporting it. Here's the problem with the Schedule I designation. When something is deemed to have no medical value, then there's no publicly funded research. So we don't know the facts, except for what has been discovered through research in other countries or whatever privately funded research has been done. And that's a problem, because we need to know if this is an effective alternative to other drugs for glaucoma or for wasting syndrome or for any number of other conditions. How about an alternative treatment to pain that's less addictive than opioids that have killed so many people in this country? But we also have other issues in the federal government. In states now where it is legal to use marijuana for medicinal purposes, federally employed doctors can't discuss that with their patients. That's a problem. A doctor should have free rein to talk about all options with their patients. And so we have more, certainly more work to do in this area of relieving pain.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Your time is up. And your response, Ms. Vukmir.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I firmly believe that this is an issue that should be settled at the state level. And I have very serious concerns about the legalization of marijuana, and people know that. I have said that. I look at marijuana and the fact that it is a Schedule I drug, which we know means there are no medical indications for its use. And therefore, I believe it is very concerning that Senator Baldwin would be willing to open this up. You know, the Department of Drug Enforcement and Education has said that marijuana is highly addictive, even more addictive than Vicodin and meth and other drugs. We have a serious heroin and opioid addiction problem in our state and in our country, and a problem that Senator Baldwin avoided at our Toma VA. And I got to tell you, I don't want to put us in a situation where we are now contributing to that and making the problem worse. The governor of Colorado, a Democrat governor, has warned, has said, states, beware, be careful before you go down this road. Also, as a nurse, I look at this from the perspective of the research I've seen on the brain development of our young people. I am very concerned that if we start going down this road where we make this legal, what is going to happen to our young people? I'm not willing to take that risk. Much more time is needed, and we need to see what happens in states like Colorado.
The time is up. And now we're going to go over to our social media desk with Holly Chilson, and she has a question for you, Ms. Vukmir.
Thank you, Jill. Good evening, ladies. A lot of people on social media wanted me to ask about climate change. A report released earlier this month by the United Nations Scientific Panel on Climate Change says the consequences of climate change are more immediate than previously thought. That includes worsening food shortages, wildfires, and a massive die-off of coral reefs by the year 2040. Ms. Vukmir, you signed the No Climate Tax Pledge, which means you would promise to fight legislation that taxes industries producing carbon. Ms. Vukmir, do you agree with the science behind climate change and its effects? And in light of the UN report, does your stance now change? And Senator Baldwin will also want to hear your take on the report as well.
Well, God gave us this great earth, and it is our responsibility to nurture it and to care for it. And that means making sure that we are taking care of our natural resources. But we also have to be careful that when we go down the road of trying to affect climate change, and climate is changing. I think everyone agrees to that. But what we have to be careful of is when we go down this road, that we balance whatever procedures and mechanisms that we're doing to try to affect the change in climate, that we're not just doing something without certainty that is going to make a difference. That's the problem with so many of these green ideas. They're not based in science, and they're based on a whim, and there's no certainty that it's actually going to make a difference. We have to balance our need for protecting this beautiful earth that was given to us with the need to make sure that we're not spending money in areas that aren't going to make a difference. And oftentimes, these are proposals that put a lot of onus on countries that are the only ones that follow through on it, like America, and other countries are doing absolutely nothing. And how fair is that? It is not fair to our industries, but I believe we can truly take care of this if we balance those two needs together. I'm committed to it. I know we can do it, but we have to be careful that we just don't embrace crazy, extreme ideas that have no certain benefit to make a difference on the environment.
Your time is up. And now for a response, Senator Baldwin.
Thank you. I've reviewed the UN climate report. It does present very dire concerns, including global temperature warming of about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit by 2040. I also see it all around me. I've been twice up to northern counties in 2016 and 2018 just to survey damage from incredibly extreme rain events that have washed out roads and cost local communities, state and federal resources in order to repair on an emergent basis. So I see what's happening. My opponent, and this is where you have such a clear choice in this election, my opponent not only disputes climate science, and I'm learning today that she also is disputing some of the science behind cleaner energy sources, et cetera, but she also would see fitting to eliminate the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, which protects the water we drink and the air we breathe. We all share that on this planet, and we have got to continue to press for better stewardship and resiliency these days. In addition, I just have to say that the effects are around us. They're immediate.
And I have to say your time is up.
Okay.
So we're going to move on.
Can I respond to that because she made something that was very false? I've never said that the EPA. You may do that in your closing statement if you'd like. If you'd like to use that in your closing. I've never said that the EPA.
If you'd like to do that in your closing statement, you may do it then. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question.
And the new topic is the topic of the Supreme Court, Senator Baldwin. An ABC News Washington Post poll released yesterday shows Americans disapprove of Justice Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the Supreme Court by a 10-point margin. Also, 53% of respondents support more investigation by Congress into allegations of sexual misconduct and allegations of perjury by Justice Kavanaugh. Senator Baldwin, do you support additional investigation by Congress into Justice Kavanaugh's past and his truthfulness at confirmation hearings?
You know, I remember the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh and getting an opportunity to review his record. And my immediate concerns were that the people of Wisconsin have a fair, impartial, and independent voice on the Supreme Court, a justice, because I realize how high the stakes are, that hanging in the, dependent on who would be the next justice, we had the potential for the court to side with polluters over regulation to keep our air clean and to keep our water clean, that we had the opportunities to potentially see the rollback in women's health and access to contraception. And we had a candidate who wrote about saying that a president shouldn't get scrutiny or investigation or subpoenas. No wonder this president nominated him. But I have to say, I decided that I couldn't cast a vote in favor of Brett Kavanaugh after my early review of his record. I asked 7 times to the White House to meet with Brett Kavanaugh, and the White House failed to make that opportunity available to me, and dozens of my colleagues, I might add. But as to Dr. Blasey Ford, I found her credible and compelling, and I believe her, and I want all young
Senator
men and
Baldwin,
women to be able to speak their truth.
I'm going to have to invoke the moderator's option to ask you to address the specific question that was asked about reopening an investigation into the allegations against him, both of sexual misconduct and the allegation of perjury, and you have 30 seconds to respond to that specifically.
Well, I'll specifically say that I don't believe that the White House allowed a full and fair investigation. I had a chance to review the FBI report on 2 occasions after it came out, and it was clear that they limited access to witnesses, there were just a few, and didn't follow tips or clues. I think it's only fair that when somebody against all odds speaks out like Dr. Blasey Ford, that there should be a thorough review.
All right, we move on to a rebuttal, or a response at least, from Ms. Vukmir.
Well, no, I don't believe that the investigation should have been opened again. There were 7 or 8 background investigations that were already done, and Senator Baldwin decided after 48 hours after it was announced that Judge Kavanaugh was going to be the pick, Senator Baldwin said she wasn't going to support him. I mean, this to me is unbelievable. The Me Too movement requires that we hear from the woman who's made the allegations, and we give due process to the person who was accused. And you didn't even have the decency, Senator Baldwin, to even meet with Judge Kavanaugh. You had your mind made up. Where is the due process in that? And then you come up with this excuse that you called the White House and you tried and 7 or 8 times. Are you that ineffective as a senator that you could not get an opportunity to meet with somebody that is going to be before you to confirm? That is your job, Senator Baldwin. It is your job as a senator. The Senate has advise and consent. You are responsible for getting that done. You did not get that done. I put that onus on you. It's wrong. That is your job. Do your job. But we know that you haven't done your job in Washington, and that's what this is all about. You miss hearings. You miss votes. People want a representative who is going to be there for them, who is going to stand up and listen and follow through on concerns. You couldn't even meet. You couldn't even meet with Judge Kavanaugh.
I would like an opportunity to.
In your closing statement, you will have that opportunity. We're going to go on with another question.
Actually, we'll stay on the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings for a little while longer. Senator Baldwin, you said again that Dr. Ford's testimony was credible in your eyes. President Trump has said that it's a very scary time for young men in America. And there are others that fear that it's a troublesome time for women with legitimate sexual harassment claims. Who's right? What's your position? And how do we sort out competing claims like that?
And this is a question for Ms. Vukmir first.
Yes, well, thank you for that. It is an important issue, and that's why I believe that the actions of Senator Baldwin cheapen the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement is when there are serious allegations that have been corroborated, and nothing was corroborated. I believe something happened to Dr. Ford, but I don't believe Judge Kavanaugh was the person that perpetrated that on her. And it was clear that there was nothing to corroborate that. And I think this is why it's so important that we have people who are willing to listen to and actually follow through on the due process. But Senator Baldwin has shown us that she isn't interested in doing that. You know, there's a far more serious case of a Me Too movement in the neighboring state of Minnesota. The Attorney General candidate, Keith Ellison. And Senator Baldwin not only stands with him, she has been endorsed by him, or has endorsed him. And here's a case where the accused person, the woman who has put the allegation forward, has serious reports, medical reports, showing the extent to which she was allegedly victimized and hurt and beaten up by her boyfriend. So in that case, a serious Me Too movement. And Senator Baldwin, you're there, but you could not be there for Judge Kavanaugh and give him an opportunity for his moment.
Your time is up, and now an opportunity to respond, Senator Baldwin.
We've got to clean up a bit here. Leah is lying again. And first of all, the way you make an appointment with a nominee is to go through the nominator, which is the White House. I am among dozens of senators who were denied the chance to meet with him. I don't know if they're going into protection mode, but that is the truth. And we certainly have documentary evidence of that. I have the best voting attendance record in the entire Senate and House delegation at 99.6%. Just wanted to note that. But
what about your hearings?
The questions are asked by the panel. The questions are asked by the panel.
And I would just state not showing up to 7 out of 10 opioid task force hearings. That is the record of my opponent, Leah Vukmir. But I want to get to the question here. There's lots of reasons people don't speak up. Some don't believe that they'll be listened to. Some don't believe they'll be believed. Dr. Blasey Ford came forward with great loss to herself and her family. She's been threatened, but she thought it was her civic duty. But we have to create an environment in a world where people can do that. Why did some of the victims in the Catholic Church take decades to speak out? Why did Dennis Hastert's victims take decades to speak out?
Thank you, Senator.
It doesn't have to be corroborated. People need to speak their truth.
Thank you. And now we're going to move over to Holly.
Jill, thank you. Ladies, let's talk about abortion, specifically Roe v. Wade. Since the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh, there's been more conversation on social media and elsewhere on what would happen if Roe v. Wade were overturned. According to a July poll from NBC News and the Wall Street Journal, 71% of Americans do not want it overturned, including 52% of Republicans. But if it is, what would be your next move, especially for women who are left with no legal means for an abortion? Senator Baldwin, this is your question first.
Yes, well, I support Roe v. Wade. I am pro-choice, and I believe that a woman should have the right to control her own body and make her own medical choices. And I don't believe that this is an area where government or Leah Vukmir should intervene. My opponent's positions on this have not only been supporting the overturning of Roe versus Wade, but well beyond that, measures that would ban in vitro fertilization, by which many couples who desperately want children have been able to conceive. It would include banishing stem cell research that has created promising treatments and cures for people who need it. It would ban access to abortion in all circumstances, including rape and incest. The fact remains in the state of Wisconsin is that there was no repeal ever of the laws that existed before Roe versus Wade was decided. So immediately in the state of Wisconsin, we would have a situation where doctors could be arrested and where women would sadly probably begin to lose their lives again if the right to a safe and legal abortion were taken away. So I strongly believe that we need to fight
Senator
to protect
Baldwin,
women's health choices.
You're out of time. And again, by moderator's option, the question was, what would you do if Roe v. Wade were overturned as the next step? And that is your 30 seconds to respond.
Okay.
What would you do?
So certainly I would try to pass laws that would protect a woman's right to control her own body. But the immediate impact is actually a state level impact. And I'm in the United States Senate. So at the federal level, I would certainly press to reinstate it by legislation. That said, women, depending on what state they live in, would be in jeopardy of no longer being able to control their bodies.
All right. Thank you. And now for a response, Ms. Vukmir. And again, the question was, what would you do after Roe v. Wade would be overturned?
Well, I'm a nurse, and I, as a nurse, am 100% pro-life. I can't imagine not being pro-life. And Senator Baldwin wants to talk about extreme, and she also wants to, make up all kinds of things about different pieces of legislation that I supposedly support or don't support. Again, extreme to me, Senator Baldwin, is supporting partial birth abortion. I've said this to you before. I don't even know how you put your head on your pillow at night knowing that you support the most despicable act of pulling a baby out of the mother's womb, limb by limb, sucking the brain out, crushing the skull. Most Americans find that repulsive. And yet this is what Senator Baldwin stands for and has a hard time explaining, obviously, because it is absolutely disgusting. I believe that we should support life. I have always supported life. I remember as a young nurse holding a 24-week-old baby in my hands, and I saw that tiny heart beating, just beating so quickly under that thin chest wall, trying to cling on to life. And Senator Baldwin believes that that's a woman's right to choose. That is the right to kill. It's wrong. I will always oppose it.
Ms. Vukmir, you are out of time, and I have to invoke the option again. The question was about what would be done after Roe v. Wade, especially on behalf of women.
Abortion is wrong. What can I say? Abortion is wrong. There are other choices. I don't understand why people look at it from this perspective. I have met people whose parents decided to give them up for adoption. And they are so grateful that those parents gave them life instead of aborting them. I don't know why we aren't talking about these other options that are available. There are so many people that want to adopt children.
Your time is up on your 30 seconds. I appreciate. We'll move on. The next question goes to Ben. I'm sorry, to Melissa.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. We're going to turn our attention now to immigration, if we can. Ms. Vukmir, we are here in America's dairyland, where Wisconsin dairy farmers rely heavily on immigrant workers, many of them undocumented. A study by Texas A&M University says the loss of immigrant workers will negatively impact the state's signature industry. Ms. Vukmir, you have said that a wall must be built before anything can be done about immigration. The wall could be years away. What should farmers do in the meantime?
Well, I'm the daughter of Greek immigrants, and I spent a childhood watching my aunts and uncles come to this country. I helped them study for their naturalization and citizenship test. They assimilated into this country. They wanted to become Americans. It was so important to them to become Americans. And I feel very strongly, I still feel very strongly, that that border security, that wall must be built. It is the first and foremost thing. I stand with President Trump when he calls for that. And I've got to tell you, as I travel around this great state, people strongly feel that way. Why are we letting people cross this border, participate in this American experience? I believe that Senator Baldwin, on the other hand, would prefer open borders, complete open borders. I don't believe it. I know it. From Senator Baldwin's perspective, her idea of a border would be drawing a line in the dirt with a wink and a nod. She supports MS-13 gang members coming across our border. She doesn't even vote for Kate's Law. Imagine the young, beautiful woman in California. She was murdered by an illegal immigrant who had 7 arrests, 7 felonies, and he had come back 5 times. He had been sent back to Mexico. And that woman died at his hands, and Senator Baldwin voted against Kate's Law. This is wrong. People want to see illegal immigration.
Ms. Vukmir, you are out of time on that question, but I have to invoke the moderator's option because the question was specifically about what you would do for Wisconsin farmers who were impacted by the loss of immigrant labor? You have 30 seconds to respond to that specific question.
I strongly believe in enforcing our borders and legal immigration. And I'm sorry, but it is so important. It is not fair that people who have gone through a process that is a process that for years people have gone through to participate in the privilege of becoming an American. Now, I think that there are a lot of things that we can do, our farmers, and many things that we have done here in Wisconsin to encourage people to go into different industries. But it is important that we follow
30 seconds is up.
Nation of
Senator
laws
Baldwin,
that we
you're
are.
next.
Thank you. Well, we do have a broken immigration system, and we need solutions, not just political issues. I had the opportunity to work with Republican and Democratic colleagues in the United States Senate to pass a comprehensive immigration reform bill in 2013. Unfortunately, the House did not take it up. It dealt with border security, 20,000 new Border Patrol agents. It dealt with agricultural visa issues, like the one I'll return to in a second that affects dairy. And it dealt with a pathway to citizenship for our dreamers as well as others. And it passed with 68 bipartisan votes. We know we can do it, but as we politicize this issue over and over again, that's unfortunate. We lost 500 dairy farms last year in Wisconsin. We're on the pace to outnumber that significantly this year. There's a lot of reasons, but an uncertain and unstable workforce is one of them. And most dairy farms couldn't last a week without their workers. One of the things we fixed in that bill I referred to was the fact that most agricultural visa programs are for planting season and harvesting season. But we know that dairy cows need to be milked every day and every day of the year. And so seasonal visas don't work. That's one of the things we should fix and that I fixed before. But unfortunately, my opponent won't even look at this till they build a wall.
And your time is up. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. It goes to Ben.
Let's stay on immigration. Let's talk specifically about the practice of family separation on the southwest border. The Washington Post reported yesterday the Trump administration is actively considering a plan that could again separate parents from children at the border. It would give families seeking asylum a choice after spending 20 days in detention. Stay together in detention or allow children to be separated and taken to a government shelter. Senator Baldwin, do you support this plan?
I don't. And I believe that, frankly, there's been administration failure on this issue time and time again. Like my opponent, this seems to be more attractive as a political issue that no one wants to get down and solve. Just like my opponent, Trump won't talk about much else until he gets his wall. Well, I truly believe that we need comprehensive immigration reform. But on this issue, when we were seeing babies snatched from their mothers and fathers, it was harrowing for all of us to watch, but imagine how harrowing for the families involved. You know, a few years ago, during the Obama administration, we had a different situation also involving children. We had unaccompanied children coming to our border without their parents. And I asked a lot of questions then about how we handle a crisis such as that, how we make sure we have foster families or relatives that we can place with, how we make sure that there's humane conditions. We don't put children in cages like this president has done, and we can't ever look at doing that again. His changes on asylum are despicable. We are a country that welcomes immigrants, and we should always be that country, and we can do much better than this.
Ms. Vukmir?
Well, it's interesting to hear Senator Baldwin talk about how outraged she is about children being separated, and we should be. It's wrong. But where was that outrage, Senator Baldwin, when the same thing was happening under the Obama administration? I never heard from you, never heard a word. You never did anything. But now, because it is President Trump, you want to go on the attack. There's nothing that President Trump will do that you will support. It's obvious this is what this party is all about. Just delay, distract, do everything you can, obstruct. And you're obstructing a process that will enforce our legal system. You know, I think it's very important that we have a wall, that we build that wall, that we do create a pathway for those who are here. Senator Baldwin, what you are doing, though, is you're just willing to let people jump the line. And until we take care of our border security, people will continue to take advantage of all of the things that we have in this country. And you want, of course, with your complete government takeover of health care, to then have these people be a part of the healthcare system as well. Where are we going to fund this? There is so much that you don't understand about this system, and the fact that you are just so willing to allow people to come across our border and
you're out of time.
Jump the line of those who have been here.
Ms. Vukmir, we're going to move on to one last question for which you each have 90 seconds. And I believe that goes to Jeff.
All right. At the end of the first debate, you were both asked 3 ideas to reduce gun violence in the nation. Ms. Vukmir, you answered essentially that you supported the Second Amendment as a means of self-protection and better mental health care. Senator Baldwin, you said a bump stock ban, a crackdown on straw purchases, and universal background checks. Ms. Vukmir, would you support any of those ideas? Bump stock ban, crackdown on straw purchases, or universal background checks? Or do you have other specific ideas besides those that you mentioned already in the first debate?
Well, thank you. I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I feel very strongly that it is something that our founding fathers put so high up on their list that they made it the Second Amendment. And as such, I believe it's important that people have the ability to protect themselves. You know, when my life was threatened, that's the first time I decided to purchase a gun to protect my family. And people have to be given that opportunity to do that. Senator Baldwin wants to take away those abilities. She will move forward with a variety of proposals that will curtail our Second Amendment. She talks a good game. She talks about being a gun owner, and she talks about the fact that she supports the Second Amendment, but then she makes fun of the NRA when she's in Washington. She votes for an assault weapon ban. The fact of the matter is, yes, I believe there are things that we can do. I support getting rid of the bump stock, absolutely. I think it's important that we also have carefully crafted red flag laws that look at the mental health issues, and we look at the reporting issues that were lost in many of these cases. Information, vital information, was not passed on to law enforcement or between law enforcement. As long as we do it carefully crafted, where there is judicial oversight, this is something that is going to go a long way towards preventing these things from happening in the future. Let's look at all of these cases and what actually caused the problems instead of trying to take away our Second Amendment rights, which is what Senator Baldwin is always trying to do.
The response now from Senator Baldwin.
Well, you're correct. I did propose those 3 common sense safety measures, and I do not believe any of them run afoul of the Second Amendment, or I wouldn't have proposed them, because indeed I am a gun owner and I respect the Second Amendment. But I can't understand how any candidate for any level office can witness Parkland and Newtown and Orlando and Oak Creek, Wisconsin, and not feel compelled to get better solutions. And I don't mean things like arming teachers. I mean things like making sure that there are no purchases and no exchanges, to the extent we can require that, that don't get a comprehensive background investigation. I believe that straw purchasing is one of the biggest issues that leads to some of the less high-profile shootings that we hear about, but yet things that are devastating our communities. And I believe it's a no-brainer to get rid of bump stocks after we saw what happened in Las Vegas. There's bipartisan agreement, and we ought to get to the task.
Your time is up. Thank you. We're going to go now to individual 30-second questions for which we don't have a rebuttal unless you attack each other. So we're going to start with Holly with your 30-second question.
In the interest of bipartisanship, Senator Baldwin, is there an issue on which you agree with President Trump? Again, you have 30 seconds to answer.
Oh, thank you for that. Actually, there's quite a few issues on which I agree. I'd start with the fact that the president came to Kenosha, Wisconsin to sign his executive order on Buy America. I had talked to the president before he came and said I was working on Buy America infrastructure legislation. And in Kenosha, he said, I back it 100%. Just last week, I passed a bill that adds to Buy America. I also agree with the president on approach to renegotiating trade agreements that have not served our working people well.
Thank you.
And last,
your time is up.
One more.
All right, we'll hold that one. We'll go on to Chris.
All right, how about a similar question then for Ms. Vukmir? Are there policies from the Trump administration that you disagree with?
I'm pleased with how the president is working so far and working so hard for America in the last 2 years that he's been in. You know, unlike most people, I don't want to see this president fail. I want to see this president succeed. And I think the president is doing an amazing job. He's standing up to foreign leaders. Peace through strength. When I think about how our previous administration, President Obama bowed to foreign leaders, literally and figuratively.
Your time is up, and you didn't answer about whether or not there is any subject on which you disagree, so let the record show that, but we'll move on
I'm
to
giving
the
the president
question.
an A so far in
All right, let's go on to the next question. Your time is up.
And next to a topic with plenty of talk and plenty of campaign ads in this race as well, the Toma VA. Senator Baldwin, your office took no action for months on a report detailing the overprescription of opiates at the Toma VA. You said you took responsibility for that. What do you wish you would have done differently in your handling of the situation at the Toma VA?
You know, when I learned about the fact that the Toma VA was overprescribing, I immediately took action, and I worked along with the family of a veteran named Jason Simkoski, who died at the Toma VA. That family, mom and dad, widow and child, said, we want to turn our tragedy into hope for other veterans. And so with the DAV and the VFW,
Senator, I'm sorry, your time is up. We have
crafted
to move
legislation to fix it.
The next question. All right,
The next
Melissa?
question, thank you very much. We are going to stay with the Toma VA. Ms. Vukmir, the family of Jason Simkoski, who died of that overdose at the Toma VA, supports Senator Baldwin's campaign. The family has also called the ad that your campaign is airing, which mentions Jason, as shameful. Why have you continued to air that ad?
My heart goes out to the Simkowski family, and they are to be commended. They are to be commended for forgiving Senator Baldwin for her lack of action at what happened there. But it was more than Jason Simkowski who was affected. Countless veterans have been affected and are still affected today because they have been overprescribed 14 and 15 drugs. The drugs were leaching out into the community, and Senator Baldwin only jumped into action when it appeared that she was found out. That is
to our
wrong.
closing statements. And so the closing statements are 2 minutes in length. The coin toss says that Leah Vukmir will go first. Ms. Vukmir, and I'm just going to give you a little advice. The timer is going to show you 30 seconds and then 1:30. That's just a quirk of the timer. I want you both to know that, not to be rattled. I got your back. All right, please start.
Well, thank you, WBA, for sponsoring this debate. And I'm sure that the listeners and the viewers today can see the very stark differences between Senator Baldwin and myself. Senator Baldwin is somebody who is extreme, represents the extreme of her party. Senator Baldwin looks to government for all of her solutions. I'm a mom with a cause who just got into action because I was concerned about the overreach of government in my daughter's classroom. You know, people in Wisconsin are looking for leaders who understand the day-to-day challenges facing families. I grew up in that big fat Greek family, teaching my aunts and uncles to study English so they could assimilate into this country. I worked my way through college, and I taught my children how to read because school wasn't doing it. I wanted to make a difference. I jumped into action and made a difference. I know what it's like to try to make ends meet, and I know what it's like to worry about getting your kids to college. Senator Baldwin doesn't understand these day-to-day struggles. Senator Baldwin is far more comfortable with her friends in the Hamptons than she is at a Friday night fish fry in Wisconsin. When a veteran died at the Toma VA, her only reaction was to be concerned about her own job. That is a betrayal of Wisconsin values. I've been a nurse my whole life. I have taken great pride in taking care of my families and my patients. I have made a difference in their lives. I want to take that same passion to Washington and represent the people as I have done here in Wisconsin. I thank you very much. I'm asking for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you, Senator.
Well, I want to also thank our hosts, our reporters and moderator, and the viewers who have tuned in this evening. It is my enormous honor to serve as your United States Senator. But I think that this debate shows you the clear choice in front of you. Do you want a senator who's going to stand up for Wisconsin? Or do you want a senator who is going to stand up with the special interests, as she did repeatedly with the big insurance companies in her votes in her 16 years as a politician in the Wisconsin legislature? You know, I have never been afraid to stand up to big, powerful interests. I stood up to Wall Street when I introduced the Brokaw Act. I stood up to multinational corporations in fighting for Buy America policies for our infrastructure that helps businesses like Neenah Foundry that makes manhole covers and has for 147 years. I stood up to Big Pharma when they jacked up prices on all sorts of life-saving drugs, whether it be the EpiPen or MS medication. All of these things are things that my opponent has not. I think some of the key differences that we didn't get to tonight include the fact that my opponent supports a tax plan that gave 83% of its benefits to the top 1% wealthiest people and big, powerful corporations, and only the remainder to hardworking families and middle-class families. If it had been the opposite way around, that bill would have had my support. But when you make a decision to give one corporation, ExxonMobil, a tax break that is bigger than the combination of every individual and family in the state of Wisconsin, that's just wrong. And then there's pre-existing conditions. I will always fight for coverage for people with pre-existing conditions and fight to make health care more affordable. The choice is clear. I ask for your vote.
I would like to thank the candidates, thank our panelists, and of course, thank you for tuning in, and just to remind you to vote on November 6th.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's debate, an opportunity for Wisconsin citizens to hear from the leading Senate candidates in a nonpartisan forum. This debate has been sponsored by our WBA Foundation through a grant from the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. Our sincere thanks to the Wisconsin radio and TV stations who work together to produce and air this broadcast, to the candidates, our moderator, and our panelists. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Exercise your right as an American and vote. As always, WBA member stations will be on duty to bring you the results.
I was proud to serve my country in Vietnam, and I'm proud to stand up for someone who's done right by our veterans. That's Tammy Baldwin.